Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We will start the webinar anytime soon. Just give a few minutes to allow everybody to join this webinar. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Desmond. Welcome, everyone. Wonderful to have so many of you joining us today. So we'll be looking at a very interesting programs this afternoon called Portugal Golden Visa. Just before we start, allow me to give a short introduction about our company. So Global Migration is a licensed migration advisory firm that was being set up by myself 16 years ago. Just a little bit of our milestone and the backgrounds. Our company has been seen as a premium migration firm in terms of the services. Over the last 16 years, we have achieved more than 99% of the successful rate. And to date, we have helped more than 12,000 families successfully obtaining their residency across the countries and the jurisdiction that we are representing. Our success records has also ended us with certain awards. Now, today, we have our offices across Asia, from Singapore to Malaysia, to Australia, to Vietnam, as well as Hong Kong. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed migration advisor with 16 years of experience in migration and business matter. I was trained as a chartered accountant with Pricewaterhouse for 8 years before I started my migration advisory work. So my training has enabled me to help the clients and guide the clients through, when it comes to the business and investment programs particularly. This is one of the, I'm honored to receive these awards in Los Angeles when I was being nominated as one of the top 100 migration advisor a few years back. Now, these are the countries that we specialize in. We cover Australia, New Zealand, Portugal, United States, as well as Canada. I would like to do a quick overview about these 5 jurisdictions. Obviously, many of you out there, find it very familiar with Australia, perhaps United States and Canada and New Zealand. And you see Portugal being in the center. And I find these programs really, really interesting. And I would like to just to put forward some of the thought when it comes to deciding where would be the countries or jurisdiction that you want to gain the residency for yourself and your family member. Now, I think the first important aspect for you to take into consideration in terms of getting the PR or residency certainly is what would be the requirements for you or your family member to have to fulfill the residency after gaining the residency. And just to emphasize here, Australia and New Zealand in general require your family members to spend on average of 40 to 50% of your times over, in the countries. And this could become potentially a challenge, to some of you out there. No doubt, the Australia has been voted or has been the first migration destination compared to all other countries in the world. And Australia has beat over the last 4 years to become the top migration destination around the world. While putting the residency considerations, you know, the next consideration I suggest that you should take into account is also who can you bring with you, you know, within the application. So many countries that you see over here, often the times you can bring your children's and dependent kids. For example, Australia, the age of dependency is below 23 years old. New Zealand 23, United States 21 years old, and Canada likewise, you know, also has a very stringent requirements on the age of dependency for your children's. But when it comes to Portugal, even if your children's were to be in the school at the age of 27, they will still be considered as your dependent child, and you still can include them, yeah, in the application. Other than that, I think when it comes to getting the residency, and in addition to that, you know, the next stage, which is the citizenship. So Portugal also outbid all other countries where it has the most lenient or the most flexible requirements, allowing you and your family member to get the citizenship as compared to the rest that you have seen over here. So I think one last interesting thing about Portugal over here is really when you are applying for this Portugal residency, it actually opens you and your family members to the rest of the 27 countries in the entire European region. Whereas for Australia, it is a country between Australia and New Zealand. For United States, it's one country alone. Canada is one country alone. And my clients, when they learn about, you know, Portugal programs, though they might already be a PR on certain countries, but then when they learn about, you know, how much of opportunity that they have through these programs, they find it very, very attractive. Now, just about this Portugal Golden Visa. What is this Portugal Golden Visa? When we talk about this Portugal Golden Visa, I personally find these programs as the best and the most attractive investment programs to access the entire Europe. Yeah. So in this webinar, you will learn how these programs allow you to gain the residency, not only in Portugal, but also to open you and your family member to all others 27 countries in the Europe. So if you do not wish to move over to Portugal yet, take notes just to emphasize that these programs require a very low residency. On average, you only need to spend 7 days per year over the first 5 years, yeah, just to fulfill the residency requirements, yeah. And beside the lowest residency that I've ever seen among all the programs, the amount of investment is relatively low, yeah. So we're talking about, you know, 280,000 euro of investment to get the entire residency for your family. So I believe later, you know, our lawyer, Antonio, he will be sharing with you as well who can be included in this application. You'll find that these programs are basically welcoming, you know, a big family members. Yeah. So when we talk about this low investment of 280,000, I find that the most interesting thing about this investment is it allows you to invest directly into property. Yeah. And Pricewaterhouse and EY, Ernst & Young's, has nominated Lisbon and Porto as the most potential city for property investment in the entire Europe. Yeah, and you'll find out more. Now, just to talk a little bit more about being a Portugal Golden Visa holder, what does you and your family member has access to? Of course, you know, within the first 5 years periods, all of you have the rights to live, work, and study in Portugal. And if your children are, you know, to go to the public school, and it is free. And likewise, the university, being a 2 years of residence, and they would enjoy a local fee. So immediately, every one of you would also have the access to the free healthcare. Yeah. And having this golden visa residency status, that gives you the access and move around within the second area. So I think this has become more important, especially with the pandemic and the borders restriction and the control. This golden visa status has allowed you and your family member to travel without, border control. So of course, golden visa also ended up, giving you options to become a citizen of Portugal. Yeah, and one thing in addition to that is really a bonus. Being a golden visa holder, you could also enjoy, a special tax incentive for the first 10 years. Yeah. Now, a little bit more, in addition to being a Portugal golden visa residence, should you consider to take up a passport, and then becoming a Portuguese, and you and your family member will have the access to the rest of the 27 countries, yeah, where you're giving rights to live anywhere they like, anywhere they wish to study, and enjoy the full education benefits and the social healthcare benefits, just as any of the EU citizen. So these are the 27 countries that everyone is looking at, yeah. So you have the access to, including Ireland, should your children wish to study medicines, and they would enjoy, the education benefits. All right. Now, next, beside myself, there will be 3 other speakers. And the first one that I'm going to introduce is Antonio. He is our lawyer based in Portugal. So Antonio has more than 20 years of experience in legal and migration advisory matters. So he has been handling our clients across the Asia, and he has, been doing a very, very good job understanding, the Asian clients' needs, and very accommodating. And often the times, we even have to work over the weekend, and Antonio is always there available. Antonio, would you like to say hi to everyone?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Desmond, for your very kind introduction, and glad to be here on your webinar.
Right. So we also have the next speaker, Jamie Gui. So Jamie Gui is our investment expert. So she is the managing director of Integrative Asia. And me and my whole teams are so impressed with a solution that she has been providing to our clients all this while. And her solution is fantastic. And you really wanted to speak to her, either end of the webinar or, set the times to talk to her, whether it is for GV purposes or whether it is for purely an investment purposes. She's fantastic. Jamie, yeah, would you like to say hi?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jamie. Thank you so much, Desmond. It's been a pleasure to work with your team. I guess the reason why I'm very passionate about Portugal and being a specialist in Portugal is also the fact that I'm a golden visa holder myself, and I was in search myself for very good investments. It's great to be able to share this entire program and the options with your clients. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. So we have also today our guest speaker, Ricardo. She is from Sparks Capital. And this is one of the very established developer in Portugal. And you're going to hear from him very soon the interesting projects that they have and their experience in terms of handling. One of their area of the expertise among many other aspects that they handle is to work with us on, for the golden visa clients. So we have gone through how to restructure, the projects to meet the immigration's requirement, and the project has over the years has been proven, that it has met all the requirements of the GV application, but at the same time has given clients a good rental and capital appreciation. So Ricardo, say hi.
Hi everyone, how are you? Thank you, Desmond, for the kind introduction. Yeah, so I'm a consultant for Spark Capital. We are, as Desmond said, a real estate developer, primarily in Lisbon, but a few areas around it as well. And we have seen very good price increases over the past few years, particularly within the Gold Visa program, make for this a very interesting option, just as James was explaining within the Gold Visa program. So I'm very happy to be here and share with you some of my thoughts, experience, and knowledge within this program and why Portugal is an excellent choice for investment. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ricardo. So there are more details will be covered in this webinar, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar as well. And we welcome as much questions. So over to you, Antonio.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Desmond. And I will be walking everyone through the main characteristics, main features of the Portuguese Golden Visa program and why it has been so attractive. It was introduced in 2012, so almost a decade now, and it has definitely stood out as one of the main investment by residency programs, residency by investment programs in Europe, definitely. Now, one of the great advantages, of course, is visa-free travel in the Schengen area, meaning you do not have to apply for Schengen visas every time you need to come over to Portugal, and you can even stay up to 90 days in every 180 days in any other European country apart from Portugal. Portugal, you can stay, live, work, study for as long as you wish once you become a Golden Visa holder. Other European countries, Schengen countries, 90 days in every 180 days. In terms of requirements, for the main applicant, of course, we would be looking at the main applicant has to be legal age, clean criminal record, no issues health-wise. If you plan to live in Portugal, then you will be required to produce a health insurance with coverage in Portugal. If you're only planning to stay or fulfill the minimum stay days, that is fine, you don't need one. Then, of course, being a residency by investment program, you need to transfer the money into your Portuguese bank account, comply with one of the investment options, visit Portugal an average of 7 days a year during 5 years, or 14 days over a 2-year period, so you can just fulfill that minimum stay requirement in one go. And of course, maintain your investment during at least 5 years. We will now take a look at the flow of the actual application. So initially, of course, we would take a look at your own personal situation. What are your requirements? How we can best structure your application. Then we would continue with the document collection, drafting the powers of attorney and translation. We open a tax file number. This does not mean that you will be tax resident in Portugal. It only means that you have the requisite tax number to purchase the property, to open the bank account. Once the bank account has been opened, then you will transfer your funds and select your investment. If it's a property investment, we would, of course, take care of the conveyancing, purchase of the property, and registration with land registry. Once that's been done, we would submit your Golden Visa application for pre-approval. Once you get the pre-approval, that means that you can come over to Portugal, get your biometrics taken, and then we file also the physical, the hard copies of the documents. After that, the card is issued. You will get a total of 3 cards, 2 years for each card. That means that the total duration of the cards is 6 years. But then after year 5, once you've completed 5 years, you can move on to permanent residency or citizenship. And lastly, apart from visiting Portugal, as we saw earlier, these 14 days every 2 years, then of course, we have the option to move on to permanent residency or citizenship, again, after year 5. So we have that 1 extra year during which we will wait for the application to be processed. So this is a brief summary of what we've just gone through before. GV stage or GV phase for 5 years. Then we might move into PR, permanent residency, and finally also citizenship. And you can, once you've completed your 5 years, you can move into PR or citizenship. Or you can do one first and then citizenship. It's up to you. In terms of options, we would be looking at the number 1 option first, which is real estate investment. And this includes any type of real estate anywhere in Portugal. Your minimum is 500,000 euro. In certain areas with low density of population, you get a 20% discount. So instead of having to invest 500,000, you invest 400,000. So that's one option. Another option would be to select a property that is located in an urban renewal area as defined by the council or older than 30 years old. And the total cost of property plus refurbishment has to reach a minimum of 350,000 euro. If the property is located in one of the low density areas, then again, you get that discount of 20%, lowering your investment threshold from 350 to 280,000. Also, I would say that in terms of popularity, we would be looking at the venture capital funds. Minimum right now is 350,000 euro. So you invest your money in a fund. You can also park your money in a bank deposit, 1 million euro. And you can also, if you have the entrepreneur spirit, create at least 10 jobs, 10 indefinite jobs. And these, of course, have to be kept during 5 years. In terms of the processing fees, we would be looking at 3 cards, as I mentioned just earlier. And in each 2-year period, there's a minimum stay requirement of 14 days. Now, for the first card, main applicant would be paying 533 euro. That is the processing fee. And the initial card, once it is issued, you would be paying the 5,300 fee. Family members, now family members have now seen a hike in their processing fee. It was 83.30 before, and now they have leveled that same processing fee with that of the main applicant. So we would be looking at 533 euro, and the card is also 5,300 euro. Moving on to the renewals, then we see that the processing fee stays the same, both for main applicant and family members, 533. The cost of the card itself is half, 2,600 euro, both for the main applicant and family members. So it comes to about 12,000 euro per person over the 5 years. So now we can move on to the next slide. And of course, I've discussed just now that the number 1 option is real estate investment. As you would imagine, when there is any real estate investment, there are also taxes to be paid. One-off costs would be transfer tax and stamp duty. Transfer tax is on a sliding scale. Stamp duty is fixed at 0.8%. Then in terms of annual costs, we would be looking at property tax, council tax, which is annual, and the rate is 0.3 to 0.45%. And this is calculated not on the property's market value, on your purchase price. No, it is calculated on the property's tax value, is assessed by the tax office. And this is a much, much lower value than the purchase price. If you wish to make money, to make some income, earn income on the property that you've purchased, then of course you will be paying taxes in Portugal. If we're looking at a long-term lease, then your rate is 28%. That is the rate applied to non-tax residents. If you would consider short-term rental, Airbnb style, then the rate is lower and we would be looking at 12.5%. From a tax perspective as well, Portugal is a very good choice as it has no wealth tax, no gift and inheritance tax, and a very low rate for short-term rental, as we've just seen. You might have heard that the Portuguese Golden Visa program will change some of its rules with effect January 1st, 2022. So what are these changes? Most notably, any residential options for investment in main cities and along the coast, those would be excluded. The question is, can I still buy property in these areas, Lisbon, Porto, so on and so forth, and still be eligible for the Golden Visa program? Only for commercial purposes. So if you buy retail, you buy office spaces, you buy touristic apartments, that would be eligible. Residential, no. In terms of funds, we also saw in an earlier slide that the minimum investment is 350. It will now be increased to 500,000 euro. The transfer of capital, the 1 million euros in bank deposit, will also be increased from 1 million to 1.5 million. And now, well, I would like to pass the baton back to Jamie, who will give you lots of great insight and pointers about Portugal and why it's such a wonderful place to live in. Thank you very much.
Jamie, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Antonio, for your explanation on how to go about the Golden Visa. Actually, Antonio himself is the lawyer who was also in charge of my Portuguese Golden Visa. And I'm very thankful to him for being able to assist me throughout the journey. It's been a really wonderful journey. And hence, that's why I'm really delighted to be promoting Portugal alongside with them. I also wanted to introduce Ricardo. We would like to welcome Ricardo again from Sparks Capital. Ricardo actually is, as we mentioned, represents Sparks Capital, which is actually one of the most established developers in Portugal, especially when it comes to rehabilitation, because for rehabilitation projects, it requires a certain expertise, it requires a special structuring so that the projects will be eligible under the rehabilitation program. For the purpose of today, what we're going to do is we will be educating you a little bit more about Portugal, just to share with you a little bit more from the Portuguese perspective with Ricardo today about Portugal. And also at the end of the day, we will also be showcasing one of the interior projects, which is under the rehabilitation, under the 280,000 category. So moving on, I'm going to share just a little bit more on what Portugal is all about. So Portugal is actually the most Western country itself in Europe itself. It is actually really beautiful because it has a wonderful climate, Mediterranean in nature, and the capital is actually Lisbon, and the total number of population is only about 10 million people. Now, I think one of the most important factors for anyone when it comes to foreign investments is that the most important question that most people normally ask is whether it's the safest country to invest in, how is the political situation in the country, and so on. So I would like to share one of my personal experiences is that I find that Portugal is really safe as compared to the other parts in Europe. That's why in the Mercer's list itself, in the Global Peace Index, it's also been ranked number 3 after Iceland and New Zealand as the third safest country in the world. In addition to that, in terms of Portugal as a country, it is now one of the top travel destinations in Europe. This being because Portugal, because of the weather and the beautiful sunny weather itself, it's very much for us like Bali, which I guess all of us are missing right now, or even Phuket, which is something that we go to and it's very nearby to us. And it's the same likewise for the other Europeans as well. Portugal is very, very accessible to the other parts of Europe itself. The other thing about Portugal is also it is actually ranked very high in terms of healthcare. And because of that, a lot of people are also relocating to Portugal. And in terms of the political situation itself, it is also very, very, very stable. And also because of the rather relaxed lifestyle, the average life expectancy is around the 80s, which is actually top 10 in the world, which also encourages more people to actually migrate or relocate to Portugal if you like to. And of course, the other reason that most people actually look at the residency in Portugal is because, as Antonio and Desmond mentioned, it is a very clear and simple guideline for you to be able to achieve the citizenship option, which then will allow you to have the 5th most powerful passport alongside with Austria and Netherlands, and you can travel to places like US or Canada without needing actually a visa with a Portuguese passport. The other thing that also makes Portugal a rather livable place is the fact that the cost of living is also very low. So much so that it's even lower than some of the Asian cities like Bangkok and Jakarta. Lisbon is actually ranked cheaper than even cities such as those. And it's actually one of the cheapest cities in Europe to actually live in. Forbes actually lists Portugal as one of the best places for residency and also a second passport, and also as a top expat destination. And in fact, last year itself, there was actually a big rush of Americans who are actually planning to retire in Portugal. So we're going to share a little bit more with you later on. Why did they actually choose to do so? I think one of the main reasons why Portugal was chosen as one of the main countries to look at residency is the fact that English is widely spoken. And in fact, Ricardo has been asked many times, do Portuguese actually speak as good English as you, Ricardo?
Yeah, I would say that on average, our English proficiency and the command of the English language itself is pretty high in Portugal, because I think it has a few factors that we have to consider, which is, first of all, obviously, we are a European Union country, right? So there are very strong ties within the countries in Europe. And as you may know, the British Empire has had, throughout all the centuries, a very strong position within Europe. So their influence propagated. And obviously, their English language was then kind of, propagated throughout Europe as the common language to speak, and then obviously the word later on. And so because we're in, this European Union and we're such, a close, together system, let's say, within Europe itself, then we tend to learn English from a very young age. So most people actually learn English from age 6 until at least 18. Most people actually still carry on within university and further expand their English studies there. And I personally started learning English from age 3, and my mom was an English teacher as well for some time. So that helped me train a bit better. And then, of course, right, speaking with international clients on a daily basis for quite some time now, I am able to practice quite a bit. I basically have to essentially talk for a living, right? And that obviously helps us get a better level of English. Yeah. So as you've seen, Portugal has a really high proficiency of the English language, like many other countries in Europe, which is, it's a very strong component of our culture and education.
Thank you. And I think also one of the I guess the most asked question is, how is the education system in Portugal? I mean, the reality is, let's say if one chooses to actually do the Golden Visa, you will be able to actually study for free up to high school education in Portugal. And but there are also options basically for you for one to actually look at the universities in Portugal itself. So I was I think most of the time, I think a lot of people want to know whether there were English degrees offered, and how do you actually find the Portuguese education system from your own experience?
Sure. So the Portuguese education system is pretty good, actually, worldwide, and of course, within Europe, as we can see in this graph. The education itself is, like you mentioned, Jamie, free up until high school, and then once you get into university, the highest ranked universities in Portugal are actually public universities, and the tuitions are going to range around €1,000 per year. So, compared to some other countries, particularly, I guess, with the US, that's basically free, right, in terms of tuition costs. And in a lot of other countries in Europe, you'll find similar propositions with fairly affordable tuitions, or in some cases even free tuitions, depending on the universities. And even the private universities, such as maybe Catholic, which is one of the highest ranked ones, it is not that much expensive. You might be looking at between €3,000 and €5,000 per year, depending on your major. So it's quite accessible, and it's quite good quality of the education itself. And the other point is, the one you're touching on is quite important, is that there are actually a lot of courses that are available in English. So it's entirely possible for obviously someone that's a foreign citizen to Portugal to move to Portugal and do their entire education here in English with a very high degree of quality. And then the other thing that's quite interesting within the Portuguese system, because like I mentioned, obviously we are a European Union country, and obviously we seek to cement and foster the relationships between the countries in Europe. We have a program which is quite popular, which is called Erasmus. And essentially, this is a program that allows students to travel to a different country, and for either 1 or 2 semesters, they can study there in that country abroad, and just familiarize themselves with that country, the culture, perhaps learn a little bit of the language, even though everyone pretty much speaks English pretty well. So it's actually a really interesting experience that enriches us young students, right? I did one of those experiences myself. However, I chose to go a little bit farther, actually. At that time, I guess I already knew a few countries within Europe, and I mean, I already understood that I had a pretty good English level, so I didn't feel the need to practice that much at the time. So I actually chose to do my Erasmus semester in South Korea, which again was a very interesting and enriching experience for me. I like a lot of Asian countries and culture myself, so I thought that would be an excellent opportunity. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors that make Portugal a really interesting studying destination, like Jamie highlighted, from healthcare, to obviously the English proficiency itself. The third safest country in the world is obviously absolutely paramount, right? As a foreign student who doesn't maybe know the country very well, and the parents as well, who might not know the country where their kids might be studying. So obviously all these factors are definitely very important when it comes to choosing where you'll be studying, and Portugal is often ranked pretty high.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the other thing I realized about the Portuguese as well, I find, which actually encouraged me to consider investing in Portugal, is the fact that I think a lot of them have a very similar mindset like you, whereby they are very more open towards foreign investments and open towards internationalization and looking forward to being welcoming in terms of new people coming into the country and so on. So I find that actually very welcoming, and being Asian itself, I found that itself one of the key drivers, I would say, of the foreign investments is the fact that I think for us, we find a lot of comfort in investing in Portugal, because people in general are quite open-minded and are very like-minded in that sense. Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing as well, Ricardo, I think one of the reasons a lot of people have been investing in Portugal is not just from a real estate perspective, but a lot of people are also investing from terms of foreign entities and foreign direct investments. Maybe you don't mind, it will be great if you could share a little bit more how you think Portugal has grown over the years.
Sure. So those are great points. Portugal has had an interesting position, particularly over the past few years. Now, obviously, post-financial crisis everywhere in the world was pretty heavily affected, and Portugal was in a very similar position. Now, because we are a European Union country, obviously all the countries in Europe and the European Commission, we help each other, right? And there are stimulus that can be given to these countries to help, recover and rejuvenate their economies. And now, one of the things that I consider that's quite interesting is, all the factors that we went through in terms of English proficiency, in terms of healthcare, in terms of how safe Portugal is, even how much sun we have and the weather's fantastic and the food's amazing. And like Jamie said, the culture, the people are very nice, and all these factors, they've been an integral part of our culture in Portugal for many decades now, right? But now is actually when we're seeing a much higher or accelerated growth in this past few years, because Portugal is becoming more and more popular, within this global setting that we are currently living in, right? And the Golden Visa program is a good example of just that, right? As Antonio said, the program started in 2012, and it has been quite a popular option within, let's say, European Golden Visas, because it's quite attractive in terms of both the details of the program itself, in terms of, let's say, minimum requirement to stay, but also in terms of investment. So post-financial crisis from 2012, Portugal has had a pretty good recovery, actually beating European Union GDP average growth. And obviously, those are always strong components. And another thing that's quite interesting is that there's a lot of investment that's coming in through the Golden Visa program through real estate, but not just, right? So there's a lot of other companies that are investing in Portugal because they recognize that it has a lot of potential, right? Like Jamie said, Portugal is the far most western country in Europe, and it's geographically is at a very interesting position, right? Because being at the edge of Europe, it's a little bit quicker, right, to get to, let's say, North or South America, as well as obviously to the rest of Europe. So it's strategically located and quite well. And then the other thing that's quite interesting is because of that high level of English proficiency and education, that tends to lead to high-skilled workers, okay? And if you compare, the average salary and the GDP per capita of Portugal to other, let's say, bigger countries in Europe, like the United Kingdom, like France, like Germany, and Portugal obviously is ranked lower, right? Especially in terms of, let's say, salaries, how much a person makes. So if you combine that high level education with that economic factor, you have access to pretty high skilled laborers, especially within the tech industry, which is obviously very popular over the past decade or so, that you can actually hire in Portugal very good workers to propel your company forward. And we're now seeing actually a lot of big multinational companies choosing to open an office in Portugal to develop some products here, or even in some cases moving their headquarters in Portugal. An interesting example that's actually fostering this level of growth is the Web Summit, as you can see in the lower right corner. If you don't know, the Web Summit is basically a conference where almost everywhere in the world, everyone in the world wants to come to the Web Summit and kind of live the experience. It's really interesting because a lot of startups go there to pitch their products, and a lot of these companies tend to do very well. This Web Summit has been happening for quite a few years now. That's from an Irish company that started this, and they actually signed a deal with the Portuguese government to extend the Web Summit program to 5 with an extension of 10 years. So for the foreseeable future, this program will keep happening, and every year that it does happen, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. Now, maybe perhaps 2020 was a little bit different with COVID, but we expect as restrictions get lower to resume this activity. So there's a lot of interesting factors that make investment in Portugal a very, very interesting option.
In addition to the investments that are coming in as well, would you mind sharing a little bit more light as well in terms of who are actually the buyers, in addition, of course, to like Madonna and Philip Stark and Christian Louboutin, which were all told have actually bought properties in Portugal, and even Cliff Richard, right? So bought a vineyard. Yeah. So maybe you could share a little bit more why are these people buying in Portugal? I mean, like, is it? I mean, obviously it's not for Golden Visa, so maybe you could share a little bit more with us then.
Sure. So yeah, those are excellent points. There are a lot of celebrities that have chosen Portugal as a retirement place or a vacation home, whatever the reason might be that they want to invest in Portugal. One thing is clear, they all recognize that Portugal has a lot of different factors, but absolutely valuable factors that make this a worthwhile investment, whether it is purely financial or just a home to spend some time of the year in. And they are linked to several of the topics that we've seen, right? Between being very safe, having very good healthcare, English proficiency, and obviously the numbers itself, right? So once you put all those factors together and you are a celebrity and you are looking for a place where you might want to get another home to perhaps spend the summer, then Portugal actually rises to the top of the list in terms of, let's say, countries that I might want to buy a property if I have, a considerable sum of money and I'm a celebrity and I want to move there. Then Portugal makes for a very interesting case. So in a lot of countries where the celebrities perhaps tend to spend a lot of time within their work, perhaps when you compare to Portugal, Portugal has pretty good weather. Obviously, if you want to spend some nice summer holidays, that's also a very interesting factor. And then the people are very nice. Obviously, the English level helps just the day-to-day living experience. And also, I mean, not for a lot of these celebrities that which should be a very big factor, but it's very affordable, right? So this tends to a lot of buyers to choose Portugal to go to. If we see just a few statistics here, as Brazil, United Kingdom, and France, so especially United Kingdom and France, obviously they weren't looking up until now for a golden visa opportunity. France most certainly wouldn't, but they are the third highest nationality that invests in Portugal, right? So that's completely outside the scope of the golden visa. And Brazilians is pretty much the same scenario, even though they are able to apply for a golden visa. Brazil has been investing in Portugal way before the golden visa program started, right? And of course, we have to look at history and see how strong the tie between Portugal and Brazil is, right? There's always a very strong link between the two countries. So there's a lot of different factors. And I would say that all these celebrities are looking at the same data that we're presenting right now. And ultimately, they all reach the same conclusion. Portugal is an amazing destination to go to, whether it's to financially invest or just to get a home for the holidays.
Well, I guess one of because of that, I think that's why a lot of people have been asking in terms of clients as well, whether the Portuguese property prices have come down because of the pandemic and so on. I guess based on what you've mentioned, the fact that people still want to move to Portugal, and even more so, I think during this whole pandemic has made them realize that they want somewhere that's safer with excellent healthcare. I think that's also one of the major reasons why the Portuguese housing market still remains very resilient. In fact, I would say it's very surprising that it's still going up with a double-digit growth every year itself. And I mean, that's really good news for investors, right? So, and there's always only limited properties that are available. And I think that's why it is still a very good opportunity. It's still a good time for people to start looking into investing in Portugal if they haven't done so. I think one of the projects that we want to showcase today is going to be quite interesting, because all this while we've been talking a lot about and been doing various webinars on Lisbon and Porto properties. And this particular property that we'll be showcasing next, it's actually quite interesting because it is actually in the interior area. And because we decided to do a webinar because there have been a lot of increased actually inquiries in the interior area because of the fact that the legislation may change, in fact will change by 2022. Hence, we're quite actually delighted to be showcasing this particular project. The video that we'll be showcasing later on, it's actually taken from the surrounding area of Alentejo itself, which Ricardo will be sharing a little bit more. Thank you.
Figaro called it the secret garden of Portugal. The Guardian described it as the most stunning coastline in Europe. A region of unparalleled beauty and authenticity, according to the New York Times. National Geographic calls it Portugal's time capsule. Let me tell you a secret. We call it Alentejo.
So Ricardo, perhaps you could share with us a little bit more about Spark Capital right now and more about the projects that you've done and to tell us a little bit more about this project that's actually located in the Alentejo region.
Most definitely. So we are a real estate developer. We've been redeveloping properties since 2015. Now, at the time, the 350,000, the rehabilitation option didn't exist. But nevertheless, because the market was so interesting, this is obviously an area that was quite appealing to get into, right? So we started with obviously smaller projects at the time. This number one, for instance, is a golf villa in Estoril, Cascais. This is one of our earlier projects. And this is how we started to get into real estate development with obviously smaller projects as we grew. And then the times have passed, the years have come and gone. In 2017, with the introduction of the rehabilitation option, right? So passing from minimum of 500 to 350,000, we saw there's actually a quite interesting opportunity in the market because obviously, you know, most investors are looking to get the passport or the permanent residency. That's the ultimate goal, right? So if they can invest at 500, that's fantastic. But if they can invest at 350 or even the 280,000, obviously the minimum financial outlay is a big incentive, right? So we at Spark Capital saw a very good opportunity here. And that's where we decided that that's pretty much the only thing that we're going to do. So since then, 2017, we've specialized in rehabilitation quite heavily. The vast majority of our projects are rehabilitation. I think we only have about 2 that are not. So some of these projects that we can see on this slide are projects that are either during construction or pre-licensing phase, and they're projects that we are working on to deliver for our clients. And a lot of these projects are actually sold out at this point because the market is that attractive and there's a very, very high level of demand because investors recognize that Portugal is a very interesting opportunity to invest in. But at the same time as well, the supply is a bit limited, right? Because remember, we are talking about rehabilitation projects. So it's not just that we can buy a plot of land and build something. We have to find projects that, again, meet the necessary criteria, right? So obviously we do all the necessary due diligence to make sure that it does. So we have to find these projects that are really qualifying and then obviously rehabilitate them, right? So this does take some time, right? To get all the proper tools into place and all the permits and all the criteria to make sure that's fully eligible. So it's not very easy to have a vast portfolio of properties, but that's something that we work on at Spark Capital very hard to give our investors as much option as possible. And within this rehabilitation, you know, particularly if you're looking to get a golden visa, you want to spend the least amount of capital possible. The 280,000 was very interesting, right? So what we did is basically look at where might we be able to develop a project, right, that is fully Golden Visa compliant at that 280,000 mark, but also that will be able to reward financially our investors. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, you're looking at this from a permanent residency or a Golden Visa passport perspective, but you're still putting a considerable amount of money and you should be rewarded financially, right? Now, fortunately, our previous investors, you know, dating as far back as 2015, have been very, very handsomely rewarded, right? I mean, as we saw in an earlier slide, we're talking about 10% year-on-year average growth for property prices in Portugal. And now, I'm not sure if we're going to have 10% over the next 20 years, but we definitely have some interesting times ahead, and especially in the region of Alcácer. So when we were looking at where we might want to develop a 280,000 project, on paper, a lot of regions would qualify, but that doesn't make them good financial investments naturally. But Alcácer actually rose to the top of the list quite quickly. As we saw by that video, the region of Alentejo is absolutely beautiful. I mean, I do invite everyone to just have a travel to Alentejo, do some sightseeing, spend the week there. It's absolutely bliss. Jamie has visited Alentejo. She's a Golden Visa investor herself. She can give her experience as well. But I do invite, regardless of whether you want to do a Golden Visa, to travel to Portugal and get to know Alentejo. It's absolutely beautiful. So there's a number of regions which are very interesting that I will get to in a bit, but I just want to highlight geographically how important Alcácer do Sal is. As you can see here, it takes about an hour, give or take, to get from Lisbon, center Lisbon, to the city of Alcácer. So it's quite convenient, okay? Now, Portugal is not a very big country, but in terms of accessibility, this is quite nice because most of the time, like 95% of the time, it is highway that you'll be traveling on. So it's quite easy and unencumbered to get to and from Alcácer. And as well, the other thing that's quite interesting is this highway that you're traveling on is the highway that links Lisbon at the center to the south of Portugal, the Algarve. So everyone drives through this highway and drives through Alcácer to get to Algarve. So it's a very pass-through region. And the other thing that's quite interesting, we'll get to that in a bit, is the regions of Comporta and Troia are very interesting, and they have been interesting for decades. And again, if you're trying to get to Comporta or Troia, unless you go to Setúbal and you take the ferry, you will drive through, again, Alcácer do Sal. So it's a very pass-through region. Everyone stops, and well, it's a fishing village in some sense. So you have a lot of, obviously, fish dishes, which are obviously a very important part of our cuisine and our culture. So it's very easy to stop at Alcácer, grab by for lunch, and then head on to the beach, the beautiful beaches of Comporta. You can see one of those images here on the top left, the beach of Comporta. It is 80 kilometers of protected white sand beaches, absolutely beautiful. Again, even if you don't proceed with a Golden Visa at this time, I do encourage you to travel once you are able to get to Portugal and spend some time. It's absolutely beautiful. At the end of the peninsula there, in the second image, we can see a still of Troia. So this is one of the areas where developers some decades ago were allowed to develop properties and projects, and you'll find a marina and hotels and high-end condominiums and that sort of thing. So this is where a lot of investment goes to, and then particularly.
In fact, if you don't mind interjecting, that's actually the picture that I took with my last trip on the ferry itself. That's Troia itself, and if I'm not mistaken, there's also a casino there as well in Troia, right?
There is indeed a casino, yeah. So there's a lot of developments in Troia that make it for an excellent place to live and to invest in, right? And over these perhaps past 5 years or so, the region of Comporta, Glendale, and Alcácer have started to see more and more investment and started to become that much more interesting. In fact, Madonna herself bought a property in Comporta, right? So it's a very good place to invest in. We can see here some numbers that make investments. Well, the numbers do speak for themselves, but particularly Évora and Setúbal are two very interesting locations that you can invest in, right? So Évora is, it's a UNESCO World Heritage. It's absolutely beautiful of the town. It's not really a beach setting, that's for sure. But Setúbal is particularly, right? So Setúbal has a lot of history, and obviously, as the investment has been pouring into Lisbon for quite some time, then investors are looking into surrounding regions where they might see very good financial returns, and Setúbal is one of those locations. So within Setúbal, we find Alcácer do Sal, which is where we, as a developer, decided to focus some of our investment, because it is very, very nearby. It's about a 20-minute drive to Comporta, which again, it's a beautiful white sand beaches where a lot of people, a lot of investors, high net worth investors are buying property. Now, this does mean that Alcácer do Sal is quite close, quite convenient to invest in, but you don't find the same high level of prices that you'll find in Comporta, where you'll find very beautiful villas, but upward of €1 million, which are fantastic. Plenty of investors are doing that. But as far as getting a Golden Visa, we thought it'd be very, very interesting for you to invest in Alcácer, which is even closer to Lisbon than Comporta is, and remains very accessible to Comporta itself. Now, I do want to highlight this graph here that we have. You can see on the far right the most valuable parishes in terms of price per square meter, and this wasn't the case a few years ago. If you look at the growth levels, so Grundle is actually one of those very interesting examples, because if you look at the map on the top left, you can see that that little peninsula where Comporta and Troia are part of Grundle, right? So that's why that price per square meter is that much higher compared to all of these other regions. Now, what we've been witnessing is this growth, and what we believe will be very, very good intelligence and smart investment going forward is Alcácer do Sal. Again, because of the proximity, because of how beautiful that town is. We can see that it is among the highest, but not nearly as high as Comporta, and it has a lot of room for growth, right? And the Inteljų region itself, and even aside from purely real estate investment deals and investment types, there's a lot of interesting things that you find. For instance, we can look here that Portugal is already one of the top producers of olive oil, but can be the third largest by 2030, and very good olive oil quality as well. And there's other products that are very interesting to produce in the Alentejo region because of the soil and the climate and how much that is able to yield. For example, cork is already Portugal is the largest exporter of cork, for instance, and wine as well. We are high producers of high quality wine. So there's a lot of products in the Alentejo region that grow very well, high quality, that make this region a very, very interesting and worthwhile investment region.
So moving forward, I think let's focus a little bit more in terms of the location of the property. So the property is actually located where the Red Star is in the Estrada de Amira itself, which is actually very close by. If you do Google the Alcácer do Sal itself, you'll be able to see the bridge itself. And in fact, the town, it's only nearly only about 15 minutes away. And basically there's a castle, and there's also already ready hotels as well. In fact, there is also an ex-convent and castle itself that they've converted into a 4-star hotel. So that's really quite interesting. And in fact, I'm surprised to actually see that there's so many other museums as well. And it's a really beautiful and charming city, I think also because of the Sado River, which actually you can see the next stage itself. Yeah, and by this Sado River itself, I actually had really nice choco fritos, which I think was really, Malaysians love our food. So as that's why I mentioned to you, Ricardo, we remember the places by the food. Yeah, so that's why I have a very good recollection of how beautiful the city was and really charming. And what's really wonderful is the property is located very closely to this to the town center itself. Maybe you could share with us a little bit more in terms of the general project, how many blocks and how is it going on in terms of the first phase and the second phase sales.
Sure, we'd be happy to. So as Jamie said, it is quite close to the city center itself. This is our second project in Alcácer, actually. The first one is in the center. It was a smaller project, kind of our pilot program within Alcácer that our investors agreed very quickly with. So we then partnered on to move to a second project, this development that we're looking at. We developed this development in 2 phases. So we see in the picture here modules A, B, C, E, G, and F, and this was the first phase of development, which at this point is basically surrounded. There's 1 apartment left. This has happened quite interestingly for us because we knew that this was going to be quite popular given the track record that we had with Alcácer 1. But like we've gone over moments ago. Within this paradigm of investors wanting to invest in Portugal, perhaps due to COVID, they're looking for another reason another place to invest, and maybe a plan B. They expected property prices to plunge in Portugal, and then they didn't. They actually rose even with the pandemic, because investors are still recognizing that Portugal maintains all the aspects and all the factors that make it for a very interesting investment. So we had a lot of demands from a lot of nationalities. US was one of them, and we had a lot of buyers in this development, and the phase 1 was sold out ahead of our initial projections. And with that in mind, we decided that we need to develop phase 2 given how things are going. So that's what we did. If you browse the region, if you go there, you'll see that we have some buildings that are obviously they're torn down, hence why it is rehabilitation. It does qualify for the 280,000. So we developed the phase 2. The phase 2 is actually going to be obviously very similar. This is a private condominium with 24-hour security and the pool, a nice lounge area. It has only 2 floors, right? So ground floor and first floor, as it is common in this region. And as far as the interiors go and the level of design, we wanted to go for this kind of neo-rustic. So we gathered 2 elements, obviously, in terms of green, right? Because you're in a natural setting, and as well the blue because of the proximity to the beach and the side of river, right? So we gathered those two elements and put them together. And you can see some red bezels as well, because red is a color that's very much used in the Alentejo regions. In fact, it's very common for you to find houses that have a red door and perhaps a blue bezel around at the bottom of the building itself. So our premise here is to have a condominium, and this is a level of offering that you'll find more commonly in Troya and Comporta, but not so much in Alcácer, right? It doesn't really exist, and that makes that project that much more interesting, right? At the same time, remember, you are able to invest in a Golden Visa at the lower price point of 280,000 and have a property which is pretty much unique in the market. I think we'll see these kind of properties rise in popularity more and more going forward. But at the time, it does, in our opinion, obviously, we might be a bit biased given that it's our project, but it does make it for a very interesting investment option. And one of the things that we as Spark Capital do as well, because we understand that as a foreign investor, you won't be residing in Portugal most of the time. You don't know the market as well as we, the local experts, might. So we developed a property management program as well that is able to rent the property on your behalf. And then you have a worry-free, hassle-free, turnkey-oriented Golden Visa eligible project. In fact, in Alcácer, we actually guarantee a 4% return on your investment throughout the investment period of 5 years, which is, again, how long the Golden Visa program goes for, as Antonio mentioned before. So that's our value proposition as a developer. We aim to have very good investment opportunities that are fully GB eligible. And we are able, should you choose to, obviously, it's not mandatory, but it is an option to have us manage that property for you. And, you know, it's part of our motto to have long-lasting relationship with all of our clients.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. I'm gonna thank you so much again for your explanation and on Alcácer del Sol. It's really a wonderful project by the Southern River itself. And I think for those who are actually interested, to find out a little bit more about the project, we'll be more than happy to give you a private consultation via Zoom with GMS. Do contact them basically to arrange for a free consultation. And then if it's a consultation with the, you can also arrange for consultations with our legal party as well, with EFCO Legal itself. So do contact them if you'd like to have more information. As we mentioned as well, this is just one of the projects that we are showcasing today under Sparks Capital under the 280,000 category. However, Sparks Capital being a very established developer, which we are so proud to have them here today with us, we also have a host of projects that we could go through with you on a separate occasion. Thank you so much. Desmond, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Jamie and Ricardo again. Yeah, it is such an informative session. And yeah, I think it is time for Q&A. So we welcome questions and do take this opportunity for us to address questions that you might have, or alternatively, likewise, like what Jamie had suggested, do contact us for the private session. Yeah. So Audrey, perhaps over to you if the question that's being raised, and yeah, just address to any one of us.
Sure. Thank you, Desmond. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I have a couple of questions. The first question, perhaps Desmond, would you be able to assist with this? Do we need to make an investment prior to the submission?
Sure, Audrey. Yeah, the answer is yes. So this is a residency by investment programs. So if you recall the steps that Antonio had went through earlier, you will find that steps 4 and steps 5 are in relation to the investment prior to the submission of your GV application. So the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, but this is project related, so it could be yourself or Ricardo who can answer this. Do we need to wait for the project to complete before we can apply for a GV?
So the answer is no, you do not need to wait for the project to complete. In fact, you must not wait. Remember, this is a rehabilitation development. So you must apply while the project is not rehabilitated. If the project is finished, then again, it wouldn't be rehabilitation and it wouldn't qualify for the 280,000 project, okay? So you must apply before.
I see. Thanks, Ricardo. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that.
Okay.
There's a question on citizenship. So perhaps, Antonio, you might be the best to assist with this. Does Portugal allow dual citizenship?
Yes, definitely. Portugal does allow full dual citizenship. There are no restrictions.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. We have another question. So a question, perhaps Antonio, you would be able to assist on this as well. Are there any restrictions for foreigners buying or selling a property?
No restrictions whatsoever. And I will also like to highlight that the purchase that you will be looking at is freehold. So these properties are essentially freehold, yours to keep in perpetuity, and you can definitely sell them to anyone, locals, foreigners, as you wish.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Antonio. There's another question about the investment. The 1 million euro is another method under Golden Visa, and it is not required if we choose the property investment method, right? This is the question. So maybe Desmond, would you be able to assist on this? 1 million, Desmond or Antonio, perhaps?
Audrey, would you like to repeat the question again to make sure you answer?
Okay. The 1 million euro is another method under the Golden Visa. So they're asking for this method, it's not required that we choose the property investment method, correct?
Sure. Yeah, it is one. If you recall, there are 4 types of the options, which covers property, capital transfer, creation of the 10 employments, as well as the venture capital fund. Yeah, the capital control is one of it. But this is a very interesting options among the 4. Well, first of all, we have not gotten any clients going through this capital transfer so far. I think there are a couple of reasons. One of the reasons, I guess, is the securities. For the 1 million amount of money that is kept in the bank. So I guess our suggestion from the legal point is the clients should be aware how much would they get back. For example, if the banking system or the banking system collapse, for example. So that's also we will also assess in terms of leaving 1 million over a period of 5 years, not being able to tap into the fund for a returns of almost 0.something% that is giving no returns. So this is the consideration that we put forward to the clients who is considering these options.
Sure, thank you. The other question, perhaps Jamie, you can take this. Any property gain tax if we decide to sell the property?
Yes, if you do decide to sell the property. In fact, the good thing about the investment is what I like about the Portuguese Golden Visa investment option is that, let's say, for example, you do decide on this particular property today, and then in 3 years' time, you actually do want to sell a property. If you do want to continue the Golden Visa, then you will be encouraged to make sure that you invest into another property within 3 months after you sell the property. Now, if you do that, then you can continue your Golden Visa journey. However, you also will be subjected to a 28% capital gains tax. Basically, that's actually the tax for capital gains when you sell the property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Jamie, and perhaps I guess Antonio might like to add on. I do remember there is some arrangement where people are investing within certain periods of times, and there's this tax incentive that they are getting where they are paying much lower than the 28%. Is there something or some concession arrangement for that, Antonio?
Well, basically, when you calculate your capital gains tax, there are a number of allowances that will lower your final tax bill, including the transfer tax that you paid initially upon purchase, notary fees, your real estate agent fees, and also the purchase price will be adjusted. There will be a coefficient that will therefore also lower the difference between the selling price and your purchase price. So all things considered, oh, and of course, if you have also performed, I would say a certain level of work on the property, you can also use that to lower your capital gain tax.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question, I think Ricardo perhaps would be the best to assist with this. There's someone asking about how do we make the 280,000 payment. So I think they're referring to the stages as in the payment schedule for this 280,000 investment.
Thank you, Audrey. So one of the requirements that the government and the program have in order for you to be able to apply is that the funds must have already been invested. So in other words, until you have the money transferred and invested with the necessary property acquisition contracts, you will not be able to apply for the Golden Visa, right? So we understand as well that should you want to apply as fast as possible, you must have the payment completed. Generally, our standard payment proposals includes a 90-day payment window for the full investment. But again, this is a standard payment proposal. So if the client is able to proceed quick with the investment, then he can apply immediately. If he needs a little bit more time, that is also fine with us.
Thank you, Ricardo. There's a question on health insurance. So perhaps Antonio, this would be best for you. It is mentioned that you would need to have health insurance to live in Portugal, but there's healthcare in Portugal for visa holders. So why then do they need this insurance?
Well, it is a requirement in any case. And for Golden Visa applicants who choose to live in Portugal, not only Golden Visa applicants, but any, let's say, migrant that wishes to establish his or her residence in Portugal, the purchase of private healthcare insurance would be mandatory. And of course, it's up to you to choose which way to go in the end, if you want to go with the public healthcare system or the private one. But in terms of processing the application, again, for those who wish to effectively relocate to Portugal, the healthcare coverage is mandatory. Of course, if you already have international coverage, that will do as well.
I see. All right. Thank you. Next question is on bank loan on property purchase. So perhaps Ricardo, would you be able to assist with this question on if there's any local bank that offers loan for property purchase?
Yes. So you are able to finance the amount of investment that exceeds the minimum through which vehicle you're investing with. So example, if you are choosing the property that's eligible for the 280,000 and that a particular apartment, let's say, costs 300,000, that remainder of 20,000 can be financed by a bank mortgage. Yes.
I see. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Audrey, I think just to add on to what Ricardo has said, and this is referring to the financing in Portugal, but this could also be an instances where the 280,000 that is required to be transferred to Portugal, that 280,000 can basically comes from refinancing as well from their local property. Say, let's say they own a property in Malaysia and they are remortgaging the property. That fund can be coming from remortgages. Yeah. So both way. So the remortgages, the remortgages from Malaysia and the refinancing, and the financing in Portugal. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that, Desmond. Thank you, Ricardo and Desmond. Is it a confirmed approval from GV program to citizenship after 5 years? Antonio, can you help with this, please?
Well, yes, as long as you comply with the rules in the Golden Visa program, having complied with the minimum stay requirements, having maintained your investment during this time, keeping a clean criminal record, then it is absolutely and perfectly possible to apply for citizenship and obtain citizenship. Now, of course, one thing we haven't discussed yet, but one extra requirement for both permanent residency and citizenship is a very simple Portuguese language test. It's a very basic Portuguese. People from very different nationalities, people who do not speak any Western language pass these tests. So it is not of any concern, but it is a requirement. Other than that, it's a perfectly valid route towards citizenship, just like any other.
Thank you. There's one last question, which is about dependency. Children of any age can be on this application, even though if they are working independently. Antonio, can you please assist with this?
Yes, well, for children, we need to prove that they're financially dependent, meaning children under 18, it's very clear, it's a given, they will be financially dependent. Children 18 and above, we must be able to prove that they are still dependent. And this means they must be single, number one. And number two, we should be able to prove that they are not earning money. They are not in a working capacity, for instance, that they're still studying. So proof of enrollment with any university or with any business school, etc., that would be enough to show. And even if the child is 18, 19, 20, usually when they get to 26, 27, these files are looked at a little more closely. So you would need to come up with or show substantial evidence that, of course, the child in question is financially dependent.
Thank you, Antonio. There's another question on the loan matter. So perhaps, Desmond, you can assist on this. Are there any local banks in Malaysia that are able to offer loans to purchase the property? For example, I managed to get a Maybank loan to finance a property purchase in London.
Yeah, we don't have any specific bank per se that refers our clients to, but do contact us, and then we will pass some of the contacts over for them just to speak to the banker separately.
Sure. So we will get in touch with this client. And next question, there's one more question. Does this program include spouse as dependent, Antonio?
Yes. Spouse or unmarried partner, they are eligible. And also the parents of either the main applicant and the spouse. Okay, so we have three generations: main applicant, spouse or partner, the parents of both, and children.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that is all the questions that we have for today. For now, yep. So Desmond, over to you for the closure.
Sure. So again, thanks everyone, Antonio, Jamie, Richard, and just a quick summary about these programs. Again, I find these the best and the most interesting programs for you to access to Europe. And especially for those who is not ready, to move over yet, that 7 days of residency is amazing. So if you're looking at opening up an options for your children's to the whole entire Europe, these programs make sense on both the options given to them, to the children's, and also these programs in terms of how potential the countries is, especially Lisbon and Porto, and this also makes sense in terms of the investment perspective. Yeah. So just another reminder and another highlight is the changes that's coming up, next year, 1st of January 2022. So that says it gives you, the next few months to explore and to think about this program seriously. Yeah. And it's our pleasure to share with every one of you here this afternoon, and thank you. Yeah. So
Thank you, everybody.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you,
Yes,
everyone.
have a good weekend.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.